Hi everyone, this is Abel. Welcome back to my channel. Today we have a lot of books to talk about. We have previews, reading updates, we have reviews and a little bit of an interview at the end of the video. So let's get ready. But before we start, remember that if you enjoy science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you. So if you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing, leave a like, share this video. Thank you. The first book we're talking about today is Battlemage by Flannery. This is an epic fantasy story, a standalone actually, which is pretty rare. You know, we are trained to expect huge epic fantasy stories to be released in a trilogy or even more, but I like that. I like that I can have a completed story as a standalone and have a satisfying conclusion in a long run, because this is more than 800 pages long. So yeah, it's a standalone, but it's a big one. It's a chunker, and I think that the paperback is shortened, some kind of layout design to save pages count and costs, which is a smart decision if you ask me that. But in around 800 pages it tells the story of the son of a trader. A sickly young man is described in the synopsis of the book on Amazon, which is the basis of a compelling story about personal growth and maybe search for power. He is witness to something that goes horribly wrong. It says summoning of a dragon, and I don't know exactly what to expect by that, but he has to acquire powers and abilities to solve this kind of a conflict, because being a witness and at the same time being positioned in a specific place inside the story makes him the conduit for the larger conflict that we have typically in this kind of stories. On Amazon, it is set like #1 of a series, but the book is not exactly new. It has been released in 2021, so I'm not expecting actually a series by this. Maybe a series of standalone novels in the same universe. That will be interesting, because you know, if you tackle the huge challenge that it is to create a whole new world, a secondary world for an epic fantasy stories, it is interesting to explore it in a novel, in a standalone novel. But sometimes if the world gives you that, it's expensive enough, it is important and interesting enough, it is nice to have other stories in the same setting, even if the core conflict of that first novel it is completed. There's room for more characters and more conflicts in that world. If the world is interesting enough, I'm all open for it. So let's see if it goes. I'm really interested in this. Then we have a couple of books, a bunch of books by author Snape. The first one I'll mention is a series, is a long-running series called The Weapons of Choice. The first one is Hostile Contact. I think we have 8 books out and probably more. I'm not sure if the series is closed, is already done. The first one, Hostile Contact, it's described a troubled hero, someone with a large and very long experience that it's been tasked with training younger soldiers. And while he is training those younger soldiers, they get attacked by an alien race which is vastly superior, and that slaughters most of those rookie soldiers. So he is tasked not only to try and save the one that survives, but at the same time to battle against those aliens. It is described as a mix between Full Metal Jackets and The Predator, because aliens have this kind of technology, because they can become almost invisible with this reflective material that makes them able to achieve a really effective camouflage on the battleground. So it is really interesting and really curious to have this kind of mixing, because on the Predator, if you remember the movie, which I have only a passing knowledge about it, being a science fiction fantasy, this is kind of outrageous of me not having seen that movie, I know, but as far as I can tell, all the characters, human characters, they were really experienced, and they were able to effectively try to repel the alien, even if that alien was vastly much more equipped to that kind of conflict that they have in the movie. In this one, we have an accomplished and really powerful main protagonist, even if his technology is not on par with the aliens, but at the same time he has to deal with really not that much skilled young soldiers, which makes for an interesting power struggle inside the story. I had the pleasure to chat with the author on Instagram, and he says that the first bunch of books, they're really easy reads, really fast paced, and that he tried to add layers and layers of complexity, the world building and the political schemings and the depth of the story with each installation. So I fully expect it to be more and more compelling and complex as far as the series goes. And they're fairly short reads. They're just above the novella strength length, so they're short novels, maybe around 250 pages. So if I enjoy this one, I'm pretty sure I'm going to run through all of them pretty quickly. So let's see how it goes. And then we have another series, always by Nick Snape. I think we have just 2 books out for this one specifically. The first book is called Dragon Veil. This is an epic fantasy story, a little bit of a dark fantasy story, and we have 2 protagonists. The first one is Loak. I think I'm pronouncing it right, but Nick, if you're watching this video, please feel free to correct me, of course. He's a Queen's Ranger, and he's partnered with a Sura, which is a dishonored elven warrior. And these 2, they have to battle some kind of a resurging ancient evil in the forest, and at the same time, Loak's loyalty to the Queen is put in danger. I think it is interesting that we have a complex religious world building here, as far as I can tell from the description of the book, of course, because it says that the realm is oppressed by 7 gods' houses. So let's see how this basic conflict of these 2 characters, because both him and the elven warrior, they're kind of outcasts. Something happened in their past that made them really bitter and make them questioning their loyalty to their respective kingdoms. And let's see how it is mixed and used for the benefit of the story. This personal burden and the loyalty questions and this organization with the houses connected with different gods. They are oppressing the lands and the kingdom. So it is really interesting. As I told you, we have 2 books in the series. The first one is out, and the second one is called City of Ashes. That should be released at the end of the month. So if this one is of my enjoyment, I'll for sure try and read the second one too. The Last Hunter by Chaney and Terry Mixon. This is a military science fiction novel, kind of a space opera about the captain of a spaceship, a member of the Space Navy that is supposed to go into retirement. He's at the end of his career. It is forced to go into retirement. So that tells us about something about the inner political organization of that navy, and about his character, that he will probably like to still keep operating and doing his job, but he has to quit basically. Right at that moment, there is rumors of maybe actually an attack by an ancient robotic race species that had this huge conflict with humanity hundreds of years ago, and looks like many people inside the organization, in the Navy or politicians, they're not sure if that's actually true. But this captain ends up tasked with rebuilding and make it operative again to an ancient warship that it's like the key to win this kind of conflict. So I'm really fascinated by this kind of setting because we have a captain which is unusually older than we have in this kind of stories, and because it reminds me of what we have in Battlestar Galactica, which is one of my favorite TV shows of all time, because when we have Captain Adama that then becomes Admiral Adama, and which was exactly that kind of character, with this huge knowledge, with this great experience, an incredibly wise captain, which was still really strong, really affirmative, really able to take difficult decisions and to lead his people and try to save as much as people as possible, and at the same time, as I told you, really able to take drastic, really hard-hitting decision when they were called for, with a lot of reflections about human nature and inner conflicts and morality. It was fascinating. So if we have just a tiny inch of that kind of complexity in this story, which is a long-running series, we have at least 10 books in this one. If it managed to be at least a little bit compelling like that one, this will be a new favorite for me. So I'm really hopeful for this one, and I'll let you know, hopefully, really soon. This is a strange one, but really cool too. It is titled The Visionary by Matt Sparrow. This is described as a science fantasy novel that it also have 19th century punk aesthetics, as you see it by the cover, which is really curious, but I like that aesthetic so much, especially if you mix it with some kind of fantasy and science fiction influences. So I'm really curious to see how it actually is used for the story, which is hard to describe because it looks like it has it gives a lot of space to political intrigue, because it says that we have here a totalitarian socialistic society, and the protagonist is one of the has a major role, is supposed to have a major role in this society, when there's actually no space for personal ambition and progression. He is a scientist at heart, he says, but a politician by duty. So he has this internal struggle, and I'm not sure about what is the main conflict in this one, because the synopsis is really vague about it, but at the end he says that he's trying to open a portal to another planet, and he is not supposed to do that because he has other duties, other things to do for this political party. And I'm really curious because it says that it has full illustrations inside the paperback and maybe the ebooks too. So it will be really peculiar on the production side. So I'm really curious to see what those illustrations are inside the books, and really the direction of the story, because the description is so vague. But my interest is piqued, so I will absolutely let you know what the story is about. And yeah, I'm really curious and really hopeful. Then we have Shadows of a Lost Hollow by Corey Ratliff. This is the second novella set in the same in a series called the Elmerian Chronicles. I've mentioned the first book of this series in another videos. I'm not sure when you're supposed to read this specific one, so Corey, if you're watching this video and you want to help us understand it better, please tip it down in a comment. But it says that this is about a character called Thurs Orlok, which is probably one of the characters that you see in the main series, which he is helping to forge a new kingdom for his tribe in an untamed land. And at the same time, there is a threat of annihilation for this place and his tribe. And I don't want to say more about this one because I don't want to risk spoiling the main series, which is becoming more popular and popular by the time. And it makes me even more eager to try and read the first one. So I'll absolutely give it a shot before the end of the year. There's a lot of books that I'm trying to read before the end of the year because they look absolutely incredible, really like down in my alley. They look to be tailor made just for me, for my enjoyment. So I will try to read at least the first book in the series before the end of the year, and I'll let you know about that one and maybe about this novella too. I'm reading right now Alien Incursion Blink Book 1 by Brenton Ellis and Max Wolfe. This is really fast-paced and really fun, and it gave me Fringe vibes because it is about parallel universes. We have the protagonist of the story, which is an agent that has been plucked from his actual parallel universe. So he's a human, but it comes from a world when the politics and the social construct were really different from ours. If I remember correctly, he comes from a world where there is a kingdom ruling on what were the United States. So he's from Texas, but his world works in a really different way from the way Texas works today. But he's part of this organization that tries to monitor different kind of parallel universes. And because there is this alien races, that it is actually collapsing and destroying those parallel universe. And he has a clock that is called Blink that helps him to jump between parallel universe and try to reach them before they get destroyed, because it looks like they actually cannot fight against those aliens. It's a lost cause. The most they can do is to try and save crucial people and technologies from those parallel universe. And the first mission is actually that one, because he goes to save a scientist, a woman, that is supposed to have a larger role inside the story. And really it reminds me of Fringe, because we had just two parallel universes in that story that were really similar in many ways, but extremely different in many other ways. And we had the same set of characters doing different things and then crossing paths. I don't know if we will have that. We will have different versions of the same characters in different universes. But what I have read for the story, for this, the short amount of chapter that I was able to read before filming this video, it is really compelling and really action-packed. It looks like a Michael Bay movies, especially the beginning of his career, around the time as the first Transformer. That was really, really nice and really funny, and really compelling as a story on itself. But this one is like a mix of that. It is really bombastic, really action-packed, but it has a really nice exploration of what our world could be if the story had gone in different ways. I've seen different versions of the world dominated by United Kingdom, going and colonizing the rest of the world. I've seen short glimpses of versions of our world where the Roman Empire continued to rule and exist. So it's really fascinating. Actually, at the beginning of the story where I am, they're going to visit a world when Rome is still ruling the world, and they have to wear togas to mix with the people. So it is really fun and really interesting. This is the first of a series. I think we have 3 books out. The last one was published last month, I think, 2024 or 2023, maybe 2024. And I don't know if the story is completed or if we have one. But at the same time, I know that the 2 authors, they have many series, many science fiction series, and I'm curious to see everything about it. Yeah, that's a curse for me, because when I get enthusiastic about a book from an author, or two authors, like this case, then I want to know everything about that they have ever written in their life. So let's see how this goes. I have good vibes about it, and I'll let you know pretty soon. I'm also having a blast with Shards of Wurts by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is one of the best space opera that I've read during the last couple of years, because the characters are so endearing. I still didn't have a clear picture of the big bads, the villains of the stories, because they're told mainly by flashbacks or by people recounting their experience with those. I'm almost at the half of the book, and we still have just this lurking menace on the background of them coming back, and something else, maybe an even worse threat from another dimension. But as I told you, the characters are so good and so well integrated with interpersonal dynamics that makes the story so compelling and so fun. It is really dramatic, but there are moments when people have those one-liner, deadpan one-liners. They're absolutely not out of context and never gratuitous, but they're so grim and so funny that makes the story so compelling. And I wish I have 35 hours days long, because I wanted to be able, I wish I'll be able to read so much faster and so much more. But I'm loving it, and I hope to give you a review really soon. And I'm also crossed the 50% mark, maybe I'm around the 60% mark of The Curse of the Mistwraith by Janny Wurts. And it is an amazing reading experience, because as I told you many times, this is complex on the language side of it. The story is pretty straightforward. If you look at the main bits of the story, the more you read about it, the more you understand. It is fairly linear, fairly understandable, and it is a book that is setting the stage for a large, a really long narrative, which is it's a 11 books long story. So I can see why many people consider it is too long, too slow, and too complex. But really, actually, if you look at the main parts of the story, you'll understand that it's not that difficult to understand. The story is really straightforward. What makes it so compelling, maybe above average on a complexity level, is that it is laying the ground for the rest of the story. So introducing many characters, introducing micro conflict that or larger conflict that will probably be resolved in other installment. Because as far as I can see, the resolution of the main conflict that we have, or a big part of the resolution of the main conflict, we already had that at around the half of the book. So I'm sure there will be more to discover. Maybe the characters are sure that they solved the thing, but they didn't actually. So it will be much more harder to finish and to complete as a quest at the end of the story. But I can see the book having a slightly different structure if compared to the classic epic fantasy story that we actually read, because you keep discovering things about the world building as the story goes, and about the nature of the various factions and characters that you have. So yeah, I'm having a blast, because this is really different from many things that I've read, and at the same time is really familiar, and I think it is a big achievement. It is really something unique when you can blend classic elements of epic fantasy and trying to do something new in a really organic way. So yeah, and I wish I had more time, but I can't wait to dive in and finish this book, because it's been amazing so far. I will add more books to my current readings. So this is kind of a little bit of a TBR. The first one that I'm going to incorporate in my readings is Heliotrope by Palmer Pickering. I've mentioned this one in one of my previous videos because I really love this author. She's an amazing person, she has a great personality, and she's really good. This one is a standalone, but maybe we'll have more, so not much of a standalone, but maybe we'll have a companion novel in the same world about a warrior, a retired warrior that is forced to come back because of a current struggle. This is a chunker of a book with an amazing artwork, and I'm pretty sure that the writing style that Palmer Pickering has will be perfect for me for this one too. Then another book that I will probably add to my current read pretty soon is Night Owls by Stephen Gay. This is a science fiction novel, maybe a little bit of a space opera, that it's set in a far future when the moon is being colonized. And we have a group of people not exactly working between the confines of laws. There's an underground world on Luna, on the moon, when people are dealing with many kinds of mischievous things, so I'm really interested for this one too. And then Stone and Tide by D.S. Diamanti. This is the second book in the series, the sequel to Stone and Sky that I've read a couple of months ago. A really funny high fantasy story. Funny in the sense that it has this it's really fast paced because it is really dramatic too, and this is being pitched as a really classic high fantasy story that resembles what we had in the 90s with really classic epic fantasy stories. So I'll get to this one pretty soon too. And then I'm adding An Exile of Water and Gold by Joshua Walker to my current reads. This is the first book in his series. I have read The Rest to the Gods, which is a novella set in the same world, and I loved it. About this book, I have a surprise for you. Welcome, Josh Walker. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really proud of it. I'm experimenting. I'm trying to open the doors of my little really small booktube channel and to people like you, and to try to encourage my followers and subscribers to get in contact, get in touch with others, to try to understand them better, because they will enjoy their books even more if they do. So I'm really happy to have you here, and let's see how it goes. Okay.
Awesome.
So you'll see. I have this book here, which is An Exile of Water and Gold. And then you'll have graphics on the bottom, which is the first book in a series. We also have a novella. But before all of that, please introduce yourself. Tell us something about you, and then I have a few questions for you. Okay, go.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm an author. I currently live in Melbourne, Australia. I'm originally from Sydney. And this is my series, The Song of the Sleepers. I've got them above my head here as well.
Beautiful covers.
And currently it's thank you very much. It's currently a planned trilogy. That's kind of like my attempt at fusing some real world science with epic fantasy and traditional epic fantasy, with a few kind of, crazy things in the mix.
Planned trilogy. Well, let's talk about it 10 years from now, when it's 19 volumes.
I hope not.
But trilogies are that sweet spot. We are trained to expect an epic fantasy story to be really long. It is really rare to stumble upon a standalone or even a duology in fantasy literature. So we'll expect to have the whole trilogy. But you have novellas, a prequel, and another one. We had the cover reveal just yesterday, I think. Yeah,
that's right.
Which is really nice. And tell us something about the elevator pitch for this story. So for anybody who has never heard or all the traders that haven't looked at my review for the novella will know something about you. Go.
Awesome. So what I can do, I might try to pitch the the 3 books, I should say, separately. So the Rest of the Gods, which is the first novella up there, that's kind of like Wheel of Time meets Redwall. It's a very kind of character-driven origin story about a side character from my main series, and kind of the story of her childhood and her adulthood, and the way that those 2 timelines in her life mimic the same patterns of trauma and internal conflict. So that's that one. Then An Exile of Water and Gold is an epic fantasy story, multi-POV epic fantasy story, semi-inspired by Toy Story. For those who have read it, they'll kind of understand
Really?
what that means. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have read the prequel novella, which was amazing, by the way, and which I suggest people to go and check it out if they want to taste a little bit of the flavor of the story and about your writing abilities, which are spot on. But this one is really surprises me. So yeah, please go on.
No, that's okay. I always get that reaction, so I'm used to it now. But yeah, so the Toy Story thing kind of is related to the inciting incident in the novel. But the cool thing about this world is it's about an original people known as the Aobians, who basically live on the continent of Quara with another race known as the Hidden Ones. And about 1,000, probably, how long is it? I'm forgetting my own timeline now. I think it's about 3,000 years before the story. No, 2,000 years before the story begins.
Okay.
Humans come and settle on Quara. And I guess Exile kind of tells somewhat of a colonialist story about the way that the original custodians kind of cling to the land that they were given, versus the people who have come to settle there and the struggle for power. But it's also a murder mystery, and it's got a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of real world science inspired by bioluminescence and the ways that trees network together using fungus. So yeah, lots to be explored in future books.
So I think that should click a couple of boxes for many people, because in epic fantasy is usually really difficult to pitch because there's so much going on, as you tell.
Yeah.
So many times stories start pretty self-contained, but then they explode and then they become this huge thing. When you try to explain to people, you really can't. That happened to me for example, with The Way of Kings, which I've heard about it for many years before trying to read it. You did a really good job, especially because you're trying to interwove the murder mystery with the larger scope and the tree nation that it's on the cover of the book. Which, by the way, I'm trying to convince Jeff Brown to come and be interviewed. He's really busy, but maybe one day we'll have something like this, because every time I see a book cover, if I could, I will buy all of them just because how beautiful they are. Okay, so where did the idea came from for this? The original spark of the original sparks for this story.
So a few things. I read a book called The Hidden Life of Trees. And it's a non-fiction book, but it's about the way that trees kind of interact, even down to minute kind of micro behaviors that we wouldn't necessarily see the impacts of until years later. For example, trees can actually control the micronutrients that they consume, and they can also share those micronutrients with other trees selectively. So, for example, if one tree gets invaded by disease, the trees around it actually have the ability to kind of heal it over time. And so I started getting these ideas about a network of giant trees in which people lived all over this continent. And that was kind of the first beginnings of that. Then in terms of like the magic system directly, like the luminosity, which is what it's called in the novel, that's a light-based magic system. And I guess it's kind of derived a little bit from some other light-based magics that I'd read in the past. For example, Brandon Sanderson's Warbreaker
Okay.
was a very big influence on me, both as a
Mhm.
story and in the mechanics of it as well. But also then there's, if we're looking at the plot and the characters, there's a lot of philosophy in this book. The way that the kind of the society of the Aeobans is constructed is semi-based on Plato's theory of the soul, and the way that the human is kind of divided into, soul, heart, and mind, and the synthesis between those three aspects of our being. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say. I mean, the characters themselves actually came from another aspect of the magic system, which is in the importance of names. And what I wanted to do is tell a story about characters who essentially struggled to fight against the name that governed them. And I wanted to make a commentary about how free will could operate in a world where names meant so much. So, you can see this is similar to what you were saying about the Way of Kings. There's so many little things here, and it's hard to kind of point to a single point in time where this story really began. But yeah, there's been a lot of notes over the years to get it to happen.
Especially for self-publishers like yourself, it is difficult because those elevator pitches and when you try to shrink down the story to the core elements are useful to try and share the book and to make people interested, even if as readers we know that it will probably be bigger than what you say in your elevator pitch, but it's really difficult when you're trying to entice people and you have to select that specific aspect and try to use it to make people interested in the books. But you're doing a really good job, and I have to say, you see the novella right there. When I saw that one didn't actually existed for you but not for us, but when I saw that I had that tingle, that little feeling, you said that's something special. And I was right about the novella. I'm pretty sure we'll be right about the book too. I'll read it soon. I promise. So
No, you're good.
Try and share a little bit of your reading tastes, because I asked you to recommend a fantasy book that you think, fantasy or science fiction, that you think deserves more attention. That it is some kind of an appreciated gem.
Yeah, for sure. Let me give you maybe a couple of honorable mentions first, just to kind of paint a bit of a picture. So in terms of, and this is definitely one that I think is underappreciated in the fantasy genre, it is a trad pub book, and I know that it's got a really kind of big fan base, but I just don't hear it talked about much. And that's The Painted Man by Peter V. Brett, which
I've
is
heard
part of a
about
series
it.
called The
Never
Demon's
read,
Level.
but
Yeah. It's a really good book, and what it did for me is it rejuvenated my love for fantasy, kind of around the time that I was finishing my university degree. And I think, as everyone knows, when you kind of in the throes of university, you just don't get to read what you want. And so I kind of got sick of reading, because I'd been academically reading for 3 years. So coming out of that, I was able to basically sit down, and I actually read The Painted Man in a day, and it was like that feeling of reading The Hobbit.
It's not a
Harry
short
Potter
book.
When I was a kid.
It's
not a short book. Yeah. And I'm typically not the fastest of readers. Like, I can read quickly, but that book just did something for me. I think it just worked on so many levels. And afterwards, I started to really talk a lot to my friends about, who Peter V. Brett was as an author. And I'd start listening to his interviews, and I'd start kind of hearing him talk about the story of writing that book on his phone on the New York subway for years and not knowing where it was going to go. And that's really what kind of kicked me up the butt and got me thinking about how I could start to do this myself. So I wrote a few novels, and anyway, we kind of get a few years in, and I started thinking about this particular book after a few novels kind of never made it through the querying process. And a book that has stuck with me around that time is this one here. I'll show it to you. It's called 12 Kings in Sharakai, and it's by a Canadian author. Bradley P. Ballou, and he wrote
Absolutely.
What's the name of the new book? Dragons of the Deepwood Fen, I think, is the new book. But this series is absolutely fantastic. I went on and read the whole series, but what I loved about this is the way that it kind of interpolated aspects of Middle Eastern culture, desert fantasy, that kind of old school Assassin's Creed feeling. I loved the badass kind of like strong female character in Shada, who's the main character. And that was something that I really tried to kind of mimic in some of my characters, especially if you've read the novella. Nisha, the main character, was semi-inspired by her.
I like Nisha
and
better.
So this is one of those books.
Honestly.
Oh, thank you.
That's a great book. I think that the main protagonist in that one, in 12 Kings in Sharakai, especially at the beginning, is a little bit extra. It's even too much of a strong female character. Then you see it contextualized and you understand it better.
That's right.
I didn't have that feeling with Nisha, which is much more easy to connect with the books. So
yeah, sure.
But that's a good reference. Okay, those were really good suggestions and really good picks, and I can feel it, those influences on the novella and probably on the book too. So I suggest you to all of my followers and subscribers to give a try at least at the novella, and the other novella, which is set after Exile of Water and Gold, when it will be released.
So the other novella is actually set before Exile.
Okay.
And what I'm trying to do with these novellas, just to give you a quick kind of summary, is that they're meant to cover an origin story of a different side character. So the point of this being that you can technically start the series with any of the novellas.
Okay.
You could start the series with Exile, or you could start with the Rest of the Gods, or the new one, which is The Child of the Greenwood. Any of those books work as kind of a starting point. But that book is, I'm kind of aiming to get it out. I'm thinking somewhere between January and February. I'm just not too sure yet. I've got a lot happening in my personal life where we're going to be moving into state
Take your
and things.
time.
So yeah, it might not be. I don't want to commit to a date just yet. Yeah.
Okay, so you have different entry points to the series. Yeah. I suggest people to start with the novella, with the prequel one, The Rest of the Gods, because it will give you a taste. And even if it leaves, of course, it's an entry point, but in a way it's a little bit self-contained, so you taste that one. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that you're going to want to read the rest of the series after you read that one, but it's a really short commitment because it's short, it's a novella. Yeah, that's right. But if you want to start with the big one, I totally understand you, because the book is gorgeous. So Joshua, thank you for being here, and I hope to have the chance to discuss the rest of the series after I read each and every of these books, of this planned trilogy. And I'm really curious to follow your writing journey and publishing journey, and to see how it all goes. So when you'll be rich and famous, I will say, yeah, I knew the guy when he was a nobody. and no one knew who he was, and I already read and reviewed all of these books. Yeah, it was many years ago. We were young. Okay, thank you for being here. I hope to have you pretty soon in another interview. Okay, thank you again.
Thanks very much, Abel.
This is all I got for you today. Thank you for being here until the end of the video, and remember that if you enjoy science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you. And if you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing, leave a like, share this video. If you want to see more right now, remember that you have more videos right here, right now. Thank you again. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.